Hey everybody, and welcome back. You ready to dive in?
I am always ready to get into some linguistics.
Awesome. All right, so today we're going deep on something called syntactic variation.
Oh,
Yes. And now, I know that sounds a little jargony, right?
it does a little bit, yeah.
But really all it means is how the structure of sentences can change depending on, where you're from, who you hang out with. It's sort of like accents, but for grammar.
Exactly. That's like the accent of grammar.
Okay, so to help us break all this down, we've got an expert here with us, of course.
Yeah.
So to kick things off, can you give us a clear definition of syntactic variation that, everyone can understand?
So I think the easiest way to understand syntactic variation is to think about it as like the rules behind how we arrange words to form sentences.
Okay.
So like all those grammatical rules that we learned in school. But the thing is, these rules, they're not set in stone.
Oh, interesting.
They can change and flex depending on, like you said, where someone's from, their age, their social groups, all kinds of factors.
Okay, that's really interesting. So it's not just that people use different slang words, it's that they're actually putting sentences together in different ways.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, for example, you might hear someone from certain parts of the U.S., like Pennsylvania or the Midwest, say, the car needs washed.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, and to someone else, that might sound a little off, like grammatically incorrect. They might say, the car needs to be washed. All right, but actually, both of those are correct in their own grammatical systems.
Wow, that's so interesting because, like I said, I totally heard that, but I never really stopped to think about how it actually, reflects a different way of thinking about the action, like the action of washing. You know what I mean?
Oh, right. Yeah, it's like one emphasizes the state of needing to be washed and the other emphasizes the action. And it's interesting because there's even a linguistic term for this particular construction. They call it needs plus past participle.
Wow, they had to make a whole new term for that.
They did. It's a whole different grammatical construction.
See, this is why I love these deep dives. You always learn something new.
Ugh.
Okay, so we've talked about these regional differences. They're really wild. But what about within a single region? Can sentence structure, can it change based on different groups that people belong to? I'm thinking age groups or maybe social groups.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And a great example of this is, like you said, how teenagers talk.
Yeah.
They have their own unique slang and ways of speaking that adults, we just don't quite get it right.
Yeah.
And in linguistics, this is called a sociolect. So it's kind of like a dialect, but instead of being based on geography, it's based on social groups. And you see this in all sorts of groups,
Yeah.
not just teenagers.
Hmm.
Like think about how doctors talk or lawyers. They have their own distinct ways of using language.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They
Yeah.
definitely do. It's remember back when we were in high school, how we used to shorten everything?
Oh, yeah.
Adults probably thought we were speaking a whole other language.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And that's part of what makes sociolects so interesting. It's like, yeah, they can be a way of communicating, but they're also a way of creating identity and belonging. Like when we were shortening all those words, it made us feel like we were part of something.
It did, yeah.
Exactly. But it raises this question, right? Like how do we balance accepting these variations, these different ways of speaking with the need for some kind of standardized language,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to things like education.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point. How are teachers supposed to navigate those differences in the classroom? What if a student's grammar isn't considered correct by standardized rules, even though it's totally normal for their community?
Exactly. And then think about the implications for other areas of life, like job interviews. Could someone be judged unfairly because their way of speaking doesn't match what's seen as professional or, whatever?
Absolutely. It could definitely happen. And then there's technology, right?
Yeah.
How can we teach a voice assistant to understand all these different ways that people construct their sentences? That seems like it would be really hard.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge in natural language processing right now. Like, how do you program a computer to understand all this variation? But it's also leading to some really cool innovations. Like, by studying syntactic variation, we're not only learning how to build better technology, but we're also starting to understand how language itself evolves over time.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's all these small changes, all these little variations, they add up over time and shape how we speak.
I'm honestly just blown away by how much depth there is to something that we do every day without even thinking about it. Like just speaking a sentence.
I know, right? Language is incredible. It's so complex.
Well, huge thanks to you for diving into all this with us. This has been awesome.
Of course, my pleasure. It was a fun one.
And for all of our listeners, I hope this has made you think a little bit differently about how you hear language around you. So next time you're talking to someone, actually pay attention to how they're putting their sentences together. You might just learn something um, about where they're from, their community, or even just like their unique way of thinking about the world. Thanks for coming along in this deep dive with us. We'll catch you in the next one.